Hey guys, we're getting ready to start this senior project research paper, and I need you to do some thinking before we start devoting class to it. I know you're doing a lot of research in the library with your civics teachers, and this is some stuff I need you to think about to prep for starting it in class, and it's going to really help you hone in your research and start thinking about how this paper is going to turn out and be organized. And the first thing is to think of a working thesis statement. So as you're crafting your thesis statement, I need you to think of 3 words: significance, consequence, and reason. Those are going to help you craft a really cool thesis statement that's going to drive the organization of your paper, and if you're still in the research phase, it's definitely going to help you finish up your research and get really valid sources that are going to help you write about this. So before we start, let's talk about the difference between a topic and a thesis. A topic is a broad idea, and it's not a complete sentence or thought. It's probably the answer to the question, what's your paper about? So if somebody says to you, what's your senior project paper about? You would probably answer with your topic. My paper is about marine life in deep oceans, or my paper is about ancient Indian art, or big wave surfing. You're not really telling them the direction your paper's going in unless you have a further conversation with them. You're just kind of giving them this broad idea. And you're probably not speaking in a complete sentence either. However, a thesis is something much more formal than just this short little answer to what's your paper about. A thesis is an arguable claim. It's a complete sentence or sentences, and notice I put that S there because it can be more than one sentence. And it provides direction and organization for the rest of the paper. And we've definitely talked about this with other essays that we've written, that you should be able to tell from this one sentence or group of sentences where the paper's going and what kind of big ideas are going to be covered through the rest of the paper, whether the paper's 3 paragraphs, 3 pages, or 30 pages. So let's talk about significance first. And for all of these slides, significance, consequence, and reason, I picked 2 topics, and I kind of walked through the thought process for how to come up with this really killer thesis to make the paper awesome. So the first topic that you're going to see throughout this whole recording is video games in the military. Someone asks me, what's your paper about? And I say, video games in the military. But they probably say, well, what about video games in the military? What are you going to write about? And then I'm going to answer with a more specific thesis statement. So to help me come up with a thesis statement, maybe I ask myself this significance question. What is the significance of video games in the military? Because remember, I need to have this arguable claim that's going to provide direction and organization for my paper. So with significance in mind, maybe I come up with something like, though video games have garnered a negative reputation for their gratuitous violence, games provide the military resources for training and civilian re-entry. You can tell from that sentence that I'm going to talk about the negative reputation of video games, probably related to their violence, and then further prove or argue that games have a good effect for the military. They're a valuable resource because they can provide training and opportunities for civilians to deal with re-entry, or soldiers to deal with civilian re-entry. And that's kind of a pre-service and post-service value excuse me, of video games. Another topic I'm going to cover is big wave surfing. So I'm going to answer the question, what's your paper about? Well, my paper is about big wave surfing. And then I'm going to answer the question, well, what's the significance of big wave surfing? Why should anyone care about big wave surfing? Why is it important? Maybe my thesis ends up being something like, big wave surfing is more than just long-haired beach bums testing their limits. It is a precise science of studying weather patterns, reefs, board design, and being in top physical condition. And notice I have 2 sentences there, and that's okay. I'm telling people why big wave surfing is important and why they should pay attention to it and why it's significant. And you can tell that I'm going to talk about the science of weather, reefs, how boards are designed, and what sort of physical condition these surfers need to be in. They're not just these beach bums traveling around the world surfing. So that's significance. That's one way to come up with a thesis statement. And keep in mind, as we move forward, you're not writing 3 thesis statements. You're not writing significance and consequence and reason. You're just using these 3 words to help you come up with a thesis statement. And some of them might work better than others. Consequence, another way to craft a thesis statement. And I'm going to stick with these same 2 topics, video games in the military and big wave surfing. So someone says, what's your paper about? I say video games in the military. And then to come up with this thesis, because I'm not entirely sure what I want to write about in my paper, I think, well, what are the consequences of video games in the military? So I come up with, if the military were to halt their use of video games, it would take a crucial resource away from soldiers, both preparing for service and those recovering from service. So I'm talking about the consequences, right? If video games were taken away, or not allowed, or not used by the military, that crucial resource would hurt those preparing for service and those recovering from service. That's what my paper is going to be about. Big wave surfing, let's talk about that, and consequence. What are the consequences of big wave surfing? Maybe I come up with, if surfers approach big wave surfing without the proper knowledge of weather, tides, reefs, and physical conditioning, the consequences could be deadly. So my paper would talk about all the preparation that these big wave surfers need to do, and probably cover consequences of big wave surfers that haven't done all that preparation and have had deadly consequences or near deadly consequences. Okay, so some of you might have topics that lend themselves to consequences and some of you might not, but it is a way to frame your thinking about your topic. So let's move on to reasons last. Same 2 topics. My topic is video games in the military. I ask myself, what are the reasons for video games in the military? What's behind it? Well, and it's the same kind of idea we've been talking about with significance and consequence. It's just a little different spin. Video games are used in the military for both preparatory and re-entry purposes, serving multiple goals for soldiers. Pretty simple. I'm telling you why the military uses video games. And my paper is very informational, telling you what sort of purposes these games serve for soldiers. It's not just distraction from service or an escape. It's actual efficiency, preparing them for service and helping them deal with re-entry. Let's go to big wave surfing. What are the reasons for big wave surfing? Why do people big wave surf to begin with? Well, maybe my thesis statement is, surfers seek the big wave to test the limits of both nature and their own bodies and minds. My paper then would talk about how they're testing weather patterns, reef patterns, tides, all that stuff, and also the physical conditioning and the mental preparation that goes into big wave surfing. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm looking at a 30-foot wave, I definitely need to prepare my mind for handling that challenge. So hopefully that helped. Hopefully you feel like you have a little bit more direction, and hopefully that helps you wrap up your research and begin thinking about what your paper is going to actually look like. Good luck!